r/AskReddit, nsfw, nurses of Reddit, what were the most haunting things someone said on their deathbed? Right before my grandma died, her heart rate shot up to the 220s. As the monitors started sounding all sorts of alarms, she yelled out, "Am I supposed to stop breathing now?" I work in a nursing home and one stick out for me was "My kids left me here to die. May that not happen to you, son." Former CNA in the dementia unit of an assisted living facility. "My dad is on his way to pick me up now." She said that every time I checked on her until she died about a week after it started. While she was still mobile, she would tidy her room and sit on the edge of her bed and just wait most of the day. "Don't leave me alone." My grandmother grasped the nurse's hand and said, "I think I'm going to die now." The nurse was telling her no, she was doing much better and would likely leave soon, but my grandmother was gone before she could finish her sentence. She knew. "I'm an ER doctor, old lady, big heart attack, refused treatment, so we made her comfortable, giving her morphine and benzos for her shortness of breath. While she was in the process of dying, I was with her and the family providing comfort." Her daughter said to her, "Just let go, Mom," to which old lady opened her eyes one last time, looked at her daughter and said, "What do you think I've been trying to do?" She passed away a short time later. Edit, thanks for the awards. Try to spread awareness of end-of-life care plans, particularly amongst the older folk. There's nothing worse than trying to resuscitate a 90-year-old when you know it's hopeless because the family didn't do any forward planning. "I'm scared." Elderly gentleman. Worsening congestive heart failure, incapacitated, and his wife put him on hospice. He was comfort measures only. I was at the nurse's station and I could hear him starting to gasp for air. I walked into the room and he was struggling to breathe. I put my stethoscope up to his back, but I already knew what was happening. His lungs were full of fluid. I sat him up in bed and he stared at me, eyes wide open, head tilted slightly back, facial expression was full-blown panic. "I'm scared." Immediately after he said the words, his oxygen mask started filling up with pink/red frothy foam, running down his face and dripping onto his gown. He was dead within minutes, and all I could do was watch him. I will never forget his face. I didn't mean to. We were sending this middle-aged guy home after his ER visit. As soon as we moved him off the bed, he went unresponsive and had no heartbeat. We did a couple rounds of CPR, and he began to come to. He blinked a couple times and the doctor running the code jokingly said, "Sir, you almost died on us." The man said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," in a sad way. His heart then stopped again and we couldn't get him back. Since a lot of you are asking, it was most likely a saddle pulmonary embolism. He was there for something pretty mild, but he threw a clot right when he was being transferred. If you want to look it up, he had classic Cape cyanosis across his chest, which is indicative of a big PE. How will I explain this mess? Pointing to his butt. Second hand from a close ER nurse. Lad comes in after a car accident. His work van had flipped and rolled. The fellow was wheeled in fully conscious, no pain, after EMS, or disorientation. However, he was completely twisted in half from the midsection down. There was no way he would survive untwisting, but the blood vessels must have been cinched in such a way that he didn't bleed out. The doctors and nurses explained the situation to him and suggested his family come to say goodbye. He looked like he was lounging on the couch watching TV with a blanket over his lower half. Once the realization set in, he replied with, "How will I explain this mess? I started my nursing career on a palliative unit. In my first 3 months as a RN, I pronounced 7 deaths. This one patient had advanced dementia and often believed he was at work while he was awake in the hospital. He would often give us, the nurses and care aides, tasks and jobs to do, as he believed himself to be our superior. One day near the end of December he asks me, "When is New Year's? What day is it this year?" I tell him New Year's will be the upcoming Tuesday. He nods and tells me that he thinks he's going to have to quit after the new year. This job is getting too difficult for him and he can't keep up. It's time to retire. I tell him we appreciate all the hard work he's done and we'll miss him terribly when he's gone, that he was a great employee and we all loved working with him. That Tuesday, January 1st, he passed away peacefully in his sleep at 0200. I will never forget that conversation. Edit, some misspelled words. Many moons ago when I was a nursing student, a man in his 40s was lying on his deathbed from terminal cancer, his sobbing wife lying in bed next to him. He looked at his wife, using the last bit of energy he had to gently wipe away her tears and stroke her cheek. He took off his oxygen mask and said, "Don't worry, love, don't be afraid. It's just death," and passed shortly after. I'm a nursing student in Canada, and on my palliative rotation I had a patient that was getting medically assisted dying the next day. He was an elderly cancer patient. He told me he was a self-ordained minister, nothing official, but an at-home type preacher, and that I could confess to him anything I wanted. I humored him and whispered to him some of my biggest secrets. I figured who cares, he was going to die tomorrow anyway. He told me it was all right, and I could tell he appreciated that I confided in him. He also told me his email address and said that while he would not be sending emails in return, he would be receiving them. He was a cool guy. I sat hospice with my best friend. She had breast cancer, and held it off for 8 years. At the very end, I was holding her hand for the last thing she said. "I don't want to die." She really didn't. Wish she was still here. I had to tell my grandmother that dialysis would only give her another week or so to live and it was her choice to try or not. She was in and out of consciousness at that point and was in a clear state for the moment. She asked, "Will I die?" I said, "Yes." She looked me in the eye and smiled just a little and said, "Sometimes you gotta do what you don't want to do." She closed her eyes, squeezed my hand and slept until she passed a day later. When things get hard, I always hear her say, "Sometimes you gotta do what you don't want to do." Edit, I did not expect such a response. You've all warmed my heart and made me laugh a few times too. Thank you, and I'm really happy to see my grandma's resolve to go the way of all flesh with dignity has touched so many. I worked in a nursing home and a lot of the people who were dying saw their spouses who had passed before them. One lovely old lady said her husband was in the room, and when I told her it was okay to go with him, she said, "OMG no, I hate him. I'm scared of him," and started to cry. All I could do was hold her hand and tell her I would send him away. She passed very shortly after that with a smile on her face. I hope he wasn't there for her. From when I worked in private practice. Had a patient get diagnosed with a moderately aggressive but treatable throat cancer. We tried everything we could think of to get him to consider treatment. He refused any type of treatment, so after about 3 months, his wife had their 2 adult sons basically carry him into the office at 4:50 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. I was the only nurse in the building. I got him into an exam room. Dude was completely gray, gaunt, and you could hear how close the end was every time he breathed. It wasn't exactly a death rattle, but you just knew his lungs were full of fluid. His sons sit him in a chair and he starts to slide out. The room was too small to put him on the floor and the exam table was too high to lift him up on it. I stood between his legs and held him upright in the chair while I told the sons to go get the doctor, told the wife to call 911. We all knew nothing was going to keep the man alive much longer. He patted the side of my leg, it was the most he could move, and whispered, "I should have listened to you all. I don't want to die." He lost consciousness and all I could do was just keep him from sliding out of the chair until the EMTs got there. After the ambulance got him to the hospital, he lasted about 4 hours. Had a patient screaming out, "They're coming to get me," and calling for help. He died shortly after. She looked at me and said, "You really are a little pipsqueak." I was her favorite nurse too. I'm only 18. That shit never leaves you. She had skin cancer all over from a childhood event of her cousin pushing her into boiling water and eventually couldn't even roll over without writhing in pain. It was the worst experience of my life. I shortly left inpatient nursing after that. Short story, but we had a young patient years ago. She had a history of drug use, had gotten sober a few months ago but had developed endocarditis, infection of her heart, and had vegetation on her valves as well as severe heart failure from dirty needles. She needed months of antibiotics, and then would be eligible to get a VAD, ventricular assist device, machine to bypass her heart and possibly bridge her to a transplant after being sober long enough. She had already been on the unit over a month. She was quiet, sweet, and reserved but always thankful for her care. She had no social support. Her mother was who gave her drugs the first time, and she had no contact with anyone in her life except for one friend who came in once a week to check on her. On her 24th birthday we got her a cupcake and sang her happy birthday. We hung a banner in her room, got her little presents, some games to play in the hospital and adult coloring books. She said thank you but didn't show a lot of emotion. She was always quiet and we were not entirely sure how she felt at the time. That day, on her birthday, she went into cardiac arrest and died. We spent 45 minutes trying to get her back. Her friend came in to collect her things, and showed us the message she sent her that day. It had a picture of the cupcake, presents, and banner and said, "I love my nurses. I don't know how to tell them, but they're the best family I've ever had." She did tell us in the end. I'll never forget her. I cried on and off the entire rest of my night shift. Edit, so I went to sleep between night shifts and woke up to read the comments and this blowing up. Thank you all, I'm glad it had some impact on others. This is not always an easy job. I love what I do, and I appreciate the support. Sometimes nursing is emotionally devastating, but it can be incredibly enriching as well. This event was formative for me in many ways. I still think about the impact we all have on people around us, even if they don't always have the ability to show it. Please be kind, you never know when it might make you the best part of someone's life. My great-uncle's last words before he passed were, "It is what it is." I know it's really common, but I find myself saying it quite a lot nowadays. It is what it is. My great-aunt who lived to be 101 was straight vegetative for like a month or so before passing, the day after her 101st birthday. On the day of her birthday, she suddenly was conscious and awake as everybody had come to leave a birthday cake. She told stories and laughed. Then she went back to being comatose and died the next day. Woman loved her birthday LOL. Edit went to work and came back to this having exploded LOL. I have been enjoying the conversation begun here though. Not a nurse, but when my great-uncle was on his deathbed he told the nurse, "Hey, can you do me a favor and go get my car keys, I'm ready to go." The nurse went and got the keys, and he died before she got back with them. Looked after a guy with end-stage heart failure. He kept having episodes where if he coughed or leaned forward, anything to increase his intrathoracic pressure, he would pass out. He would come back after a few minutes and gradually go from purple back to pink. How long was I out for that time? He was fully mentally fine, sharp, witty, and at peace with what was going to eventually happen to him. Him and me were joking that one of these episodes were going to kill him, as he sipped his tea and we talked rubbish. 5 minutes later it happened again and he didn't come back. He had a DNR order which was sensible. Very eerie to talk to somebody so vibrant and alert minutes before he died. Such a nice dude, I want to be in that mindset when I go to. My stepfather passed away last year. Towards the end he was very cranky and hadn't treated my mother very kindly. Before he lost consciousness he was stroking her face saying, "Beautiful, beautiful, that made me happy." A family friend had a very young niece that was dying from cancer. Her parents were there to comfort her in the final hours, and one of the last things she asked was, "How do I die?" My mom told me that my grandma's last words were, "Wanna hear a joke?" And then a long beep was the only noise that filled the room. Edit: why did you give me the helpful reward? Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you have enjoyed this video and subscribe to never miss an upload.